On a cold morning in the city, a luxury car slowed to a halt outside an extravagant mansion. The driver, a chauffeur in a crisp uniform, waited as his passenger, a well-dressed man in an expensive suit, stepped out. This man, known to many as Mr. Harrison Grant, was one of the wealthiest individuals in the city. He had built his fortune through real estate and investments, accumulating wealth that far surpassed most others. He was known for his sharp mind, his discerning taste, and his unyielding determination. He looked up at the grand entrance of the mansion, a newly acquired property that was the epitome of opulence. The marble columns, the intricate wrought iron gates, and the manicured gardens spoke of wealth beyond measure. Harrison walked toward the entrance, briefcase in hand, ready to inspect the interior and finalize arrangements with the estate manager. As he approached the heavy wooden door, he noticed something unusual. A small boy, no older than 8 or 9, stood on the threshold. The boy was thin, his clothes torn and dirt-streaked, yet there was a fire in his eyes that made Harrison pause. The boy shouted, "Don't enter this house." His voice trembled, echoing into the silent morning air. Harrison stopped in his tracks, his brow furrowing. He hadn't expected anyone to be waiting outside. The boy's warning puzzled him. He glanced at the chauffeur, who was still seated inside the car, waiting patiently. "Who are you?" Harrison called out, his voice steady but cautious. The boy took a step back, his small frame quivering. "I'm a friend of this house," he said, his voice quivering. "This house is cursed. Bad things happen here." Harrison raised an eyebrow, studying the boy's face. Was this some kind of prank? A child's imagination running wild? Yet there was something in the boy's eyes, a sincerity, a desperation, that made him pause. "Cursed?" Harrison echoed. "I don't believe in curses. Perhaps you should move along." The boy shook his head vigorously. "No, sir, you don't know. Please, trust me, don't go in." Harrison considered for a moment, then continued toward the door. He reached out and grasped the handle, but before he could turn it, the boy lunged forward, grabbing Harrison's sleeve. "Please, sir, listen to me." The boy's grip was strong, surprising for his size. Harrison felt a mix of irritation and concern. The boy's eyes darted toward the door. "Inside, there's a man who—" But before he could finish, a sudden commotion erupted behind them. A group of workers hired to clean the house before its new owner took possession emerged from the back gate. They spotted the child and rushed over, shouting for him to move aside. The boy let go of Harrison's sleeve and fled down the driveway, disappearing around a corner. The workers exchanged confused looks. "Who is that boy?" one of them asked. "No idea," Harrison replied. He watched as the boy fled. His curiosity was piqued. Who was this child, and why was he so desperate to warn him? He turned his attention back to the door, but before he could open it, his cell phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket. A message from his assistant flashed across the screen. "All clear inside. You can proceed." Harrison exhaled, slipping the phone back into his pocket. He turned back to the door and pushed it open. The door creaked as it swung inward. He stepped inside, the interior revealing a grand foyer with sweeping staircases, crystal chandeliers, and marble floors that gleamed in the morning light. He took a moment to admire the craftsmanship, noting the ornate details, the frescoes, on the ceiling, the plush carpets, the antique furniture. This house was a masterpiece. He set his briefcase on a mahogany console table and began his inspection. Room after room, he moved through the house, noting areas that required remodeling, spaces where his personal designer could add custom touches. All the while, he remained oblivious to the fact that something or someone else lingered just beyond his awareness. Unbeknownst to Harrison, the boy had sneaked in through a broken side window. He crouched behind a pillar in the foyer, watching, with fearful eyes. He had a plan to expose what lay hidden within the house. A soft sound interrupted Harrison's thoughts as he examined a study on the ground floor. It was the subtle creaking of floorboards above. He paused, listening. The house was supposed to be empty, but sound traveled differently in a house so large. He assumed it was the workers upstairs, perhaps adjusting furniture or equipment. He, made his way upstairs, climbing a grand staircase that led to a long hallway lined with portraits. The faces in the paintings were unfamiliar. Previous owners, perhaps, their eyes seeming to follow him as he passed. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. Curiosity tugged at him. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was a nursery, oddly furnished compared to the rest of the house. A crib sat in one corner, a mobile hanging overhead, its colorful shape spinning slowly. A rocking chair stood near a large window, the morning light filtering through sheer curtains. On a small table, a dusty photograph lay face down. Harrison approached, picking up the photo. He brushed away the dust, revealing a black and white image of a young boy with a familiar face, features that mirrored his own. His heart pounded as he realized the boy's face was his own. He sank to his knees, his hand pressed to his chest as if to calm a racing heartbeat. He searched the room, flipping over the photograph frame to see any writing on the back. There, in faded ink, was a name: Thomas Grant, the same last name he had spent his life forging. A wave of confusion and dread crashed over him. A sudden crash from below jolted him from his thoughts. He rose, pocketing the photograph, and hurried downstairs. As he reached the foyer, he saw the boy standing there, trembling. The boy's eyes were fixed on him, a mixture of fear and desperation. "You saw it," the boy said, his voice barely above a whisper. Harrison's mind raced. He had so many questions, but no words. He knelt to the boy's level. "Who are you?" he asked gently. The boy's eyes welled with tears. "I'm Thomas," he said. "Thomas Grant." He swallowed hard. "I'm your son." Harrison's breath caught in his throat as Thomas's words sank in. The sterile air of the foyer seemed to grow heavy, pressing down on him. He stared at the boy's face, searching for any sign of recognition, any clue to explain this impossible revelation. Thomas's eyes were a perfect reflection of his own, down to the shape of his jaw and the color of his irises. A match that could not be ignored. He rose slowly, extending a hand toward Thomas, but the boy recoiled instinctively, hurt flickering across his features. "Don't come near me," Thomas whispered, fear lacing his tone. Harrison swallowed, puzzled and pained. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said softly. "But you need to tell me everything. Why did you live here alone? Why didn't anyone look for you?" Thomas looked down at his worn shoes, his small frame shrinking in on itself. "It's a long story," he said, his voice shaking. "But you need to understand the danger." Harrison took a step back, giving him space. "I have time. I want to know." Thomas nodded, wiping his cheeks with the back of his hand. He inhaled slowly, mulling over his words. "My mother brought me here when I was a baby," he began. "She told me stories of a life we had, of a father who was kind and generous, but one day she left. She didn't say why or where she was going, but she promised she would come back. I waited, and I waited. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months. I didn't know where else to go, so I stayed here in this house. Some days I would scavenge food from the trash bins near the alley, hoping to find something to eat." Harrison felt a sinking feeling in his chest as he listened. Memories he never knew he had flashed through his mind. A woman's voice, soothing and familiar, singing a lullaby, and a photograph of a little boy in his mother's arms. He strained to remember, but his mind offered only fragments. "Why, didn't you tell me?" Harrison asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "If you're my son, why did you wait outside to warn me?" Thomas clenched his fists, his small nails digging into his palms. "Because I saw you arrive in that fancy car. I thought you were here to take the house from me, from our home. I thought you would hurt me or lock me away like a bad memory. I was terrified. But I realized something when you found my picture in the room upstairs. I needed to protect you from them." Harrison frowned in confusion. "Protect me? From who?" Thomas's eyes darted toward the grand staircase. "From the people who took everything from my mother and me. They're still here. They watch the house, and they don't want anyone to know my secret." Harrison's mind reeled. "Who are they?" Thomas hesitated, as though weighing the danger of revealing truths. Finally, he met Harrison's gaze. "They're the people Who killed her? Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Harrison's head spun. Killed? Who had killed his wife? His mind raced through possibilities. But he had no wife. He had never married. He had no children, or so he had believed. Now Thomas was telling him he had a son, and that his wife had been murdered. The floor seemed to sway beneath him, and he reached out to steady himself against the console table. Thomas continued in a hushed whisper, "My mother's name was Laura. She was your wife. She loved you deeply. But she found out about their plan to do something bad with this house. That's why they took her. I don't know all the details, but I remember hearing her screams. Then there was silence. After that, I was on my own." Harrison's vision blurred. He sank to the floor, his back against the table. Memories long buried surged. A fleeting moment of joy when he held his wife for the first time, her laughter echoing in his ears, the smell of her floral perfume. He had erased those memories, too painful to endure. Or maybe his mind had blocked them to protect him. He blinked, trying to process the flood of emotions. "Why did I forget?" he whispered, tears stinging his eyes. "How could I forget her and you?" Thomas knelt beside him, placing a tentative hand on his sleeve. "It's not your fault. They did something to you. To both of you. I remember them dragging her away, but after that, everything went dark." Harrison's mind rattled with questions, but one stood above the rest. "Where are they now? Who are these people?" Thomas shook his head. "I don't know their names. I only know that they were involved in something dangerous. They wanted the house for reasons I can't even begin to understand. They took it from us and they left me to figure things out on my own." Harrison wiped his eyes, struggling to stand. "We need to find them," he said grimly. "I need to know what happened to her and to make sure they can't hurt you again." Thomas's gaze hardened with resolve. "I've been waiting for someone to help me. For so long I thought no one would ever care." Harrison placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. "I care," he said, "more than you can imagine." Over the next hour, father and son sat on the grand staircase piecing together fragments of the past. Thomas recounted everything he could remember. The woman who brought him here, tears on her face as she whispered apologies. The tall man with a scar on his cheek who used to sneak in with her in the dead of night. The muffled voices, the fear in his mother's eyes, and the night they broke down the door and took her away. And how he survived in the shadows, too afraid to seek help. Harrison listened, taking meticulous mental notes, determined to uncover the truth. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the windows, Harrison made a decision. "We're leaving tonight," he said. "We're going to stay somewhere safe, and then we're going to start looking for answers." Thomas hesitated, fear flickering in his eyes. "What about the house? They'll notice." Harrison nodded. "I'll arrange security. We'll come back for this place once we know who did this. But right now, we need to ensure your safety." Thomas nodded, relief washing over his face. Together, they slipped out of the front door, moving through the gardens under the cover of twilight. Harrison's chauffeur, unaware of the drama unfolding, watched curiously as his employer and a young boy climbed into the car. Harrison hurriedly instructed the driver to take them to a safe location he kept for emergencies, a modest guest house on the outskirts of the city. The guest house was an unassuming building nestled behind a high fence, its white walls and blue shutters giving it a cozy appearance. Harrison had purchased it years ago as a retreat, a place where he could escape the pressures of his empire for a weekend. Tonight it would serve as a sanctuary for him and Thomas. Inside, Harrison led Thomas to a simple bedroom furnished with a twin bed, a small desk, and a dresser. He pulled a blanket from the closet and draped it over Thomas's thin shoulders. "Get some rest," he said gently. "Tomorrow, we begin our search for the truth." Thomas nodded, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. He climbed onto the bed and curled under the covers. Harrison turned off the lamp, leaving only the moonlight to filter through the window. As he closed the door, his mind churned with plans. He needed leverage, Information. Evidence. He needed to understand who had orchestrated this nightmare, and why. He retreated to the living room where a laptop sat on a coffee table. Harrison powered it on, connecting to his secure network. He opened a new document and began outlining his strategy. First, he would contact an old friend, Detective Laura Fields. She had helped him once before during a scandal at one of his corporate subsidiaries. She was tenacious, resourceful, and unafraid to dig into dark secrets. If anyone could help him find the people responsible for his wife's disappearance and protect Thomas, it was Laura. Harrison typed her number into his phone and called. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Harrison, is that you?" "Laura, I need your help," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "It's a matter of life and death." There was a pause. "Where are you?" "Safe for now, but I need you to come here tomorrow. I'll explain everything in person." "All right," she said, her tone shifting to seriousness. "If I'm not there at 9, send someone to find me." Harrison ended the call, feeling a weight lift, knowing Laura would soon be on his side. He returned to the front of the guest house and sat on the porch, overlooking the yard. The night air was cool, and the stars shone brightly overhead. He thought about Thomas, about the years stolen from both of them, and about the justice they needed to serve. He vowed silently that nothing would stand in their way. The next morning, Thomas awoke to the smell of coffee. He padded into the kitchen where Harrison stood by the counter pouring 2 cups. "Good morning," Harrison greeted, handing a cup to Thomas. The boy accepted it, sipping the warm liquid. "Ready to start?" Thomas nodded, his eyes alert and determined. They sat at the table as Harrison laid out a map of the city, marking locations. The mansion, police stations, hospitals, and any place Thomas remembered glimpsing his mother after she disappeared. Thomas traced his finger over the map, pointing to a dilapidated park near the edge of town. "She used to take me there when I was younger," he said. "It felt safe. She said it was a place where she could think." Harrison nodded. "We'll go there later. First, we need to meet Detective Fields." At 9 o'clock sharp, Laura arrived at the guest house in her unmarked sedan. She was dressed casually in jeans and a leather jacket, her brown hair pulled into a ponytail. She stepped out and approached the front door, where Harrison greeted her with a firm handshake. "Good to see you, Laura," he said. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," she replied. "Harrison, you sounded terrified." "On the phone. What's going on?" Harrison led her inside and closed the door. He gestured to Thomas, who stood behind him. "This is my son, Thomas." Laura's eyes widened. She knelt to Thomas's level. "Nice to meet you, Thomas," she said kindly. "Your father tells me you've been through a lot." Thomas nodded. "They took my mother," he said simply. "I've been living alone since I was a toddler." Laura looked up at Harrison. "Is this true? I had no idea." Harrison sighed heavily. "I didn't either, not until yesterday. I lost my memory. Something happened 5 years ago that wiped my mind. I don't remember anything before that." Laura's gaze flickered, with surprise. "Memory loss? That's serious. Do you know what caused it?" He shook his head. "I don't have all the details. Thomas thinks these people we're looking for had something to do with it." Laura leaned back, folding her arms. "All right, let's start from the beginning. I want everything you know, every little detail, and I need to talk to the staff who were in the house before you arrived." Harrison nodded. "We'll go there today. But first, I want to hear more from Thomas. I need any memory you have, faces, names, places." Thomas took a deep breath and began recounting what he could remember. The woman who brought him here, tears on her face as she whispered apologies. The mysterious visitors who roamed the halls at night, the night they broke in and took her, and how he survived in the shadows, too afraid to seek help. Laura listened intently, scribbling notes in a small notepad. When Thomas finished, she looked up. "That man with the scar, do you remember any specific features?" Tattoos? Clothing? Thomas nodded slowly. He had a tattoo of a snake on his forearm. I saw it when he pushed me aside. Laura wrote that down. Good, that could help. Harrison, do you have security footage from the house? Or maybe footage from the surrounding street? Harrison's face fell. No cameras. The place was abandoned until I purchased it. Laura frowned. All right. We'll talk to the workers who came and went. See if anyone recognized anything. We should also visit the local precinct and see if there were any reports around the time of your memory loss or around the time your wife disappeared. Harrison nodded. Let's do it. They left the guest house and headed to the mansion. The workers were just arriving, unloading equipment from a van. Laura approached the foreman, flashing her badge. Detective Laura Fields, I'm investigating a missing persons case linked to this property. Mind if I ask a few questions? The foreman, a burly man in his 40s, nodded and wiped sweat from his brow. Sure, Detective, I'm Marco. What do you need to know? Laura asked about anyone unusual who had tried to enter the property before Harrison took ownership. Marco scratched his head. There was a kid that kept sneaking around. We thought he was just a neighborhood kid looking for shelter. He'd appear in the mornings, knock on the door, then run off. We assumed he was homeless. Harrison's heart thudded. That was him, he muttered. Laura's gaze shifted to Thomas, who stood at the curb. Marco continued. One day he hid in the basement. We found him there when we were cleaning. He was starving, clothes torn. We took pity on him, but he ran off before we could give him food. Laura scribbled more notes. Thank you, that's helpful. They moved on to the local police precinct. Inside, Laura spoke with an officer at the front desk, requesting files. Soon, they were in a small records room, leafing through old reports. The officer handed Laura a file.